It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company. On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Never would have guessed, guys, and I'm pumped up for today, right? I'm pumped up in general just for the weekend and everything.
I'm pumped up every day on this show.
That's right. I mean, we get to come in and bless one another with each other's company, right? Why wouldn't you be thrilled? But we're going to go back and we're going to go to 1983 Jake, okay? 1983 Jake's 10 years old. Jake, you talk about yourself too much on the radio. I get it. I do a radio show, right? 1983 Jake is 10 years old. He's sitting in Allisonville Elementary School in the fourth grade. And actually, I take that back. This might have been 82 now that I think about it. But at any rate, I'm in elementary school at Allisonville Elementary School, and they come over the loudspeakers to pump in our now sister station, WIBC, to listen live to the NBA coin flip. The coin flip of the NBA to determine who's going to have the number one overall pick in the draft. And when they flip that coin and it lands against the Indiana Pacers and the Houston Rockets win the number one overall pick, we knew then that, but it was a big enough deal at the possibility of getting Ralph Sampson, the 7'4" wonder out of Virginia, that they pumped it in live in elementary school for us to all hear. And at that time, if you were to go back in that vacuum and whisper to that 10-year-old kid, you know what? Years from now, and yes, many years from now, you're going to be doing a radio show of the sister station of the one you were just listening to, talking about the fact that the All-Star game for the NBA is going to be played in Indianapolis, not at Market Square Arena, but in a newer arena that is going to be essentially the same age that Market Square Arena was when Market Square Arena was closed, but I digress. And you're going to have Ralph Sampson on your show to talk about the All-Star game because in 1985, he was the MVP of the All-Star game, and so he's going to revisit that and this coin flip. Jake Query, that's what you're going to talk about. I would say that has to be the lead. On that day that Ralph Sampson's coming on, that has to be the first thing that we talk about, right? And then they say, well, maybe not, because there's actually going to be a thing, Jake, in that future tense called the internet. And on the internet, there's going to be a guy named Adrian Wojnarowski who breaks big-time stories about the NBA, including about your Indiana Pacers, and a star for the Indiana Pacers is going to be joining him in Broad Ripple for what's called a podcast on said internet. I'd go, really? That has to be the lead, right? So you're telling me that I'm going to have Ralph Sampson and Adrian Wojnarowski on the same day? That has to be the first thing that is talked about, right? And they're going to say, well, not exactly. Because Indiana State, oh, yeah, I know Indiana State. They had Larry Bird played there. I remember a couple years ago when I was in kindergarten, they were in the Final Four. They're still really good in 2024? Well, yeah, but it's kind of unheard of. They get ranked, and then when they get ranked, they turn around and get beat by Illinois State, a sub-500 team from their conference at home in a game that they're not really in. Well, then that has to be like the lead thing, right? Well, kind of, except for that Butler that plays in the Midwest Collegiate Conference that has like the little the $2 tickets that played Evansville last night, and we went to the game in front of 800 people. No. It's a different Butler, but they still played Hinkle. But they're going to have a game against Marquette that Al McGuire used to coach, who's a ranked, very good team, and they're going to play well, and they're going to lose, but not be totally disappointed by it because they've done a lot of good work lately. And I would say, well, then which of those, I mean, that's all a ton to get to. Which of those is the lead? And they'd say, well, it might be the fact that IndyCar's made a change to their schedule. To which I would say, what? So there's a lot to talk about today.
So it's a low-key day.
And
it's a low-key day.
We've got some breaking news. It's just announced per Jeff Goodman that Ohio State and head coach Chris Holtmann have parted ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think that's a surprise to people, right? And, you know, Chris and I mean that came off the wrong way.
Sure.
I think Chris Holtmann's a heck of a basketball coach. I
As do
think
I.
he does a lot of really good things. I think he certainly at Ohio State this year, it was a rough year. And, you know, there was a lot of talk. People forget when Archie Miller was hired. I mean, there were people that were like, they should have gone after Chris Holtmann. Now, here is the thing for you. So all of that said, young 10-year-old Jake, Ralph Sampson going to be on the show at 12:30 on this day that we're talking about. Adrian Wojnarowski going to be on the show at 1:45 on this day we're talking about.
He's at 1 now. He just asked to move because he's got a Sports Center hit at 2 o'clock. So Woj is at 1 now.
So 10-year-old Jake.
I love high-speed news.
You have Ralph Sampson at 12:30 on this day. You have Adrian Wojnarowski at 1 o'clock. You have Danny Lopez, who's helping put together the All-Star game, coming to Indianapolis on the program. You have Eddie Gill, who played for the Pacers, coming on the show at 2:15 in that day. And yet, even with talking about Indiana State, young Jake, even in talking about Butler, young Jake, the team that we are actually going to talk about off the top, and it's going to come at the dismay of all of those probably that I just mentioned, because of the breaking news, is how it affects, that's correct, everything ties back in this town to Indiana University basketball. Everything comes back to Indiana University basketball. And life is about timing. And Todd Meyer, our executive producer who went to Purdue and loves the Boilers, is probably halfway down right now outside the studio to get mad because we're talking about IU. I get it. But life is about timing. And situations in sports are about timing. Matt Painter was on an AAU basketball trip with Todd Leary in the spring of 1989 when Jay Edwards announced he was leaving, got kicked off Indiana's basketball program. And so a scholarship opened up, and Leary and Matt Painter are sitting in a hotel room, and Leary says, man, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm probably going to go to Minnesota. And Painter says, I'm probably going to go to Purdue unless one of the two of us gets the phone call about Jay Edwards' scholarship. And they say to each other, yeah, I mean, you got to take it if it's you, and you got to take it, and I'll take it if it's me. And the phone call comes to Todd Leary. So Leary goes to Indiana, Matt Painter goes to Purdue, and Painter is now the head basketball coach of the Purdue Boilermakers. Life's about timing. For Indiana fans that are longing for stability at the head coaching position and having a team that is predominantly like Indiana kids, etc., maybe things go different if that phone call goes to Painter and not to Todd Leary. But life's about timing. Indiana fans right now, I think, know that Mike Woodson probably has another year in him. And Woodson, if he has another year in him, then that's about timing. And Indiana fans already have, whether they admit it at cocktail parties or not, you people who are fans, that sentence came off the wrong way, but folks that are listening to me that are fans of Indiana basketball, which includes a lot of my friends and obviously former classmates, deep down, even though you like Mike Woodson because he's an Indiana guy and et cetera, deep down you were like, yeah, I mean, Woodson, though, you know, things just have kind of plateaued, and Dusty May is right there. They got to get Dusty May. He's at Florida Atlantic. He went to the Final Four. He was a manager at Indiana. That's the guy. That's the guy. Whether or not Dusty May would be willing to do that, I don't know. Whether or not he'd be a legit candidate and they decide to go completely elsewhere, I don't know. But Indiana fans have circled Dusty May as one of their primary hopes. They've moved on from Brad Stevens, right? And now they're like, Dusty May's the guy. That's the savior. That's the guy. In Dusty we trust. But life's about timing. And how much of a kick is it going to be to Indiana fans if Ohio State makes a phone call to Boca Raton? because Ohio State's a job you got to look at, right? $1 million budget, historic program, better basketball program than it's given credit. And now it's odd to say this with Chris Holtmann getting fired, but it is also a job that, unless the bottom totally falls out for you, you have the ability to coach kind of off the radar to an extent. I mean, that sounds weird, but football is such a big deal there that if you go to the tournament, make a Sweet 16 every couple of years at Ohio State, you probably get a longer leash than you do at other places. But for Chris Holtmann this year, the bottom kind of fell out. I don't follow Ohio State on a week-to-week basis, but they obviously have not played well. But if you want to know how, when you work in local news, for example, you always have to, quote, localize the story. Make the story the local connection. It's why when you see, like, there's some story in California about some sort of natural disaster, and it's like, we found a man in Johnson County whose aunt once married a guy that lived in the county that was, et cetera. They always want to localize it. Localizing that story, Jimmy Cook, for Ohio State looking for a head coach, possibly, not probably, but possibly has implications in terms of the people that listen to this show and are fans of teams we cover.
Yeah, it could for the reasons you outlined, because Dusty May is always going to be an attractive name as long as he is still at the mid-major level and a higher conference team is interested in him. You outlined it pretty efficiently in terms of Indiana and a natural connection being made there. In the case of Chris Holtmann, Ohio State, I think, views itself as other top teams do in the Big Ten, as they have a simple request. They want to make the NCAA tournament every year, and they like to make a little noise while they're there. And you mentioned there's rich history there too. Maybe even make a run to a Final Four someday again. They'd like to return to that era. Chris Holtmann, during his time there, 5 seed, lost in the second round. 11 seed, lost in the second round. No NCAA tournament appearance. 2 seed, lost in the first round. 7 seed, lost in the second round. No NCAA tournament appearance. This season, no NCAA tournament appearance was the trajectory they were on. And I wonder, this is not the right way to think. To be clear, if I was Ohio State, I would give Dusty May a call at the end of the season. But I wonder if Ohio State has PTSD of going to, even though the Big East has established itself as a power in college basketball, there are real names in that conference. But I wonder if they look at Holtmann's trajectory of Gardner-Webb to Butler, where he was a very, very good coach. A very good coach at Butler. To the point that he had the natural ascension that happens sometimes at programs like that. Even though the thought was when Butler went to the Big East, this might not happen anymore. Because now you're in a legitimate conference. No disrespect to the Horizon League. I like Horizon League basketball, but it's a mid-major conference. It's not the same. And then it happens again with Holtmann. And the question becomes for Butler, how do you retain coaches? And that's a conversation for another day. What Thad Matta's doing there, despite the loss to Marquette, which we knew was a plausible one for them last night, and they hung around, that's off to the side. In regards to Ohio State, would you have buyer's remorse from what you just went through with Chris Holtmann and think to yourself, I don't want somebody that's established himself at the mid-major level, or maybe if the Big Ten and Ohio State are high and mighty, at a lower level of Big East play. I want a big name that can reset things fully here and not have us go through a rebuild. And by reset, I mean reset the expectations and bring Ohio State back to being a consistent NCAA tournament team that is making noise. They were able to do half of that, right? They had a couple stints where they'd go back-to-back years, then they missed the tournament. And now you're looking at 2 straight years without making the big dance. You should be able to do that at Ohio State with that budget, with that money. So that makes me give pause to the thought of, is Dusty May in Ohio State's mind the right hire? For you and me, for Eddie, I'd take a swing there. I'd love to bring Dusty May into my program and give him a chance to build with more resources. But are they having hesitation with that when they go through their hiring process because of, they kind of did the same thing with Holtmann to some extent, even though he did not do what May did, which is take a team with far less resources to a Final Four.
Look, Chris Beard, obviously, of Ole Miss. I mean, several people texted me. I know that he has connection because he was an assistant at Texas Tech under Knight and runs just a heck of a program. I mean, the way they played at Texas Tech and now, the year they're having at Ole Miss, he had a pretty ugly incident that took place at Texas. And I realize the charges were dropped because his fiance decided not to prosecute, and so they said they couldn't get a conviction. But he was initially charged with third-degree felony charges of domestic abuse. But, there's no conviction there, so I get it, right? He would absolutely be in the mix, I'm sure. I mean, Indiana, I think, is at the point now where it's like Indiana's been high and mighty for a long time. You know what I mean? I'll put it to you that way. So he would absolutely be in the mix. But I'm just saying, I think Dusty May would probably get interest from Ohio State. That's simply the way that I would say it. Now,
and he's earned that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it. But let's go back to Indiana State. You were commenting on, and I know that the Sycamores probably are on more thin ice than people believe when it comes to securing for themselves an at-large if they don't win the Missouri Valley Conference. That's the thing that you're looking at, right, is if they don't win the Missouri Valley Conference, you want to make sure that they are good to go. Jimmy, you believe that last night's loss could be a major obstacle for them in that regard.
Tinfoil hat music, please, Edward Garrison. Ever since my childhood, I've always been of the thought, and this isn't a real hot take conspiracy, because I think people that are fans of mid-major teams will tell you this.
If it's not real hot, then why are we using the tinfoil hat?
Because tinfoil hat's still being worn. It's just not as tight as previous takes. I'm just giving a little preface to the audience. That's important. I want continuity. I want the audience to know where the take's coming from. I think people will tell you this. The committee, it feels like, favors the power conferences more often than not when you're at the bubble line. And if you think I'm crazy, why does Syracuse get in almost every year? How many times have we seen a near 500 Syracuse team squeak in as a play-in team when maybe there was a mid-major from the Missouri Valley or the WAC that had a better case? Because it's a power school, it's a brand name, and the tournament will give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I get it that Jim Boeheim carried a lot of weight behind that, but the point is that's happened before. And if you're a mid-major team, you do not want to give the committee reasons to not award you an at-large bid. When you look at many metrics that measure good teams, and I'm talking, I'll keep you out of the weeds because I know we get into, JMB gives me a hard time about this, nerdy territory when it comes to building brackets and figuring out who's going to make the tournament or not. But by a lot of metrics, Indiana State is a top 30 team in the country. They were ranked 20th in a lot of the important metrics prior to the game last night against Illinois State, who is currently ranked, I don't know where they were before. Let's check this. They are 192nd out of like 340 teams in all of college basketball. They were 215 last night. They're now 192 after that win. So again, a bad loss, especially at home, in every metric that matters. Indiana State was 20th last night in most rankings. They're now 28th. It's not a death knell. It's not a death sentence for them. But when we talk about margin for error and the pressure that's on mid-major teams to win your conference tournament so that you don't have to worry about the bubble, if you miss out on winning your conference tournament, now you're at the mercy of the selection committee. And sometimes bad losses, especially quad 4 losses, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the rankings. A quad 4 loss, especially at home, is the worst thing that can happen to a team that is trying to get an at-large bid, especially at the mid-major level, because there's not areas to put makeup on that loss.
Okay.
But that said, it's the only one of those they've had all year. They're perfect in quad 3. They're perfect in quad 2. They're 9-1 in quad 4. I'm not saying it's a death sentence, but it's cause for concern of where do the mock brackets, Jake, go from here on out between now and the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, because it very well could be that it winds up coming down to how they do in the MoVal, in the conference tournament.
Jimmy, last year, this time a year ago, I was taking algebra, college algebra. It's awful.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was awful. Thank you to Mrs. Means, my fabulous tutor. But when I took algebra, you were allowed to drop one of your lowest grades. You took 11 quizzes, and the average of the 10 quizzes became your quiz grade. You were allowed one slip-up. In college basketball, when you are looking at mid-majors, I'm not talking about Indiana or Purdue or Notre Dame or Butler, but when you are a mid-major, I think even then you are allowed a slip-up. And the reason being because conference play is hard. Conference play, I know it was at home, But conference play is hard because you're playing against guys that are familiar with you. And I know Indiana State's got a revamped roster and whatever else, but it's just different than going outside your conference. But at the mid-major level, whether you're talking about St. Mary's in the Big West, or you're talking about Indiana State in the MoVal, or you're talking about, somebody that's in the Horizon, okay?
Butler went through that for years, man. Like, my childhood would be, you can't lose to Cleveland State at home because no one understands how tough conference play is, to your point.
But what I'm saying is this. When you play in a mid-major, the committee is aware of the fact that handicaps you immediately because you only have, based on your conference schedule, 1 or 2 opportunities for an upper quad win, but you are playing with quad 4 fire on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you're going to have an off night. You're going to have a night where a guy didn't shoot well. You're going to have a night where a guy had his girlfriend broke up with him the night before. You're going to have a night where somebody pulled the fire alarm in the hotel on the road, whatever. So you're allowed a slip up. And the reason is because of the fact that you have more opportunity. You have more games against lower quad players, lower quad teams when you're in a mid-major than you do the upper echelon. So therefore, the law of averages says that you're going to have more quad 4 potential losses than you have potential wins over a quad 1, for example.
Right.
So yes, it does not help. You would love for them to have maintained a ranking, the national conversation, right there in that 9-10 line going into the Missouri Valley and to Arch Madness and getting an opportunity to cement themselves. I get that. It does not help, but I don't know how much it really truly hurts them. Now,
it turns up the notches a bit. One caveat
it makes
to that.
Everything here out more important.
Because on the road, and we were talking with John about this yesterday, SIU is a tough place to play. And the Salukis of Southern Illinois are a quad 2 team. That would be a good win to add to your resume. It's the last one they have before a meeting with Drake or somebody like that in the Missouri Valley final if they make it all the way there. After the quad 2 against Southern Illinois 3 days from now, they go on the road at Valpo, 288 ranking of college basketball, 340 schools, quad 4. At home against UIC, 179th in the country, quad 4. On the road at Evansville, 176th in the country, quad 3. At home against Murray State, quad 3, 140th in the country. There aren't opportunities left other than SIU. So I think you and I are in agreement. This is not a death sentence to them. They deserve a get-out-of-jail-free card for one bad loss. The fear now, though, is how do you close these final 5 games of the season? Because you mentioned it. There's landmines of quad 3 and quad 4 the rest of the way. And if you stub your toe, you're really putting your hands on the committee, which is something you never want to do unless you get your own get-out-of-jail-free card, which is you win the MoVal, and then all of this is irrelevant.
Yeah,
I'm with you, though. It
ramps it up a little bit, right? Again, you stub your toe once, you better put some bandages on it, right? When we come back, it is All-Star Week in Indianapolis. It is only the second time that the NBA All-Star Game has taken place in our fair city. The only other time, the first time, probably everybody stayed at the Hyatt, went to Union Station, maybe enjoyed a little dinner at the Claypool Court. I'm not sure. But the guy that was the most valuable player in that game and a guy that was almost a pacer joins us next.
The IRS is the most
Mid-'80s, this song was the number one song in the land the last time the NBA All-Star Game was in Indianapolis. The guy that you just heard hitting that shot that sent the Houston Rockets into the 1986 NBA Finals, in my opinion, the most underappreciated, ridiculously impossible shot in the NBA of the 80s. And the most valuable player in that game at the Hoosier Dome joins us now on the program. Ralph Sampson, the former Houston Rocket, and, of course, Virginia All-American, joining us on the program. Ralph, it is a pleasure. How are you?
Hey, the pleasure is all mine. You called me and we got on today, and I thank you for doing all that. But you brought back great memories of being in Indiana. I can remember coming through the airport on the pregame, and they showed the shot with the Lakers. So good memories for me, and thanks for having me.
Hey, you know what? Let's begin by, and I'm thrilled you're here talking with us. Let's begin with this, and we'll get to the coin flip in a second. But the All-Star Game itself in 1985, it was such a big deal for the city, Ralph, because, you had 24 points in that game, 10 boards. You were the most valuable player. It was a star-studded affair, obviously, but, I mean, just from a legendary standpoint. What are your memories of being in the city and maybe the hub or lack thereof in 1985 versus what we're going to see this the All-Star Game in Indy?
Well, I tell people all the time. So I think Magic, I had 24 points. Magic probably had 8 because all he had to do was run, and he made those great passes. So give him kudos all the time. He gives like a 25% of that trophy. So anyway, it was a great game, and we enjoyed it. But Indianapolis, I think, and hopefully, I don't know if they had an All-Star Game prior to 85, but or after 85, what it may be. But the city, to me, is a great venue for any sporting event. You got everything downtown, which is the first time I was there. Everything you can walk to, that you can go to, restaurants, to the arenas. It's right downtown, so it's a perfect place. My son played at University of Minnesota. They had the big tournament there, and we go there. But it was a perfect place for that. I've been there for NCAA tournaments as well. So it's one of my favorite places to come for sporting events because everything is right nestled downtown. And there's no other city, I think, like that you can walk, have great hotels, and have great food. So I think Indy is one of those special places for sure.
When you go back to Indy at that time, and now, obviously, and downtown has been so built, Ralph, as you know, having come to Big Ten tournaments and, playing here in games for years, sports was such an important part of the birth and the growth of Indianapolis. You were nearly a big part of that. And I remember, I just told the story, being in elementary school, and they came over the loudspeakers at school to play the live radio call of the coin flip, and all of us at Aliceville Elementary School are sitting there in Virginia shirts, and we're thrilled, right? Oh, my gosh, we're going to get Ralph Sampson. What's your memory of nearly becoming a Pacer? Did you have any conversations with the Pacers prior to that draft?
Yeah, I'm sure my agent did. At that point in time, we did talk about it. And I was able to come out of high school to the NBA, but also, I didn't. I stayed, and then my freshman year, I was able to come out as well. I'd have been a number one pick, probably. They say, but Kevin McHale wouldn't have gone to the Boston Celtics, right? It'd been a whole different ball game. The next year, Isaiah Thomas might not have gone to Detroit Pistons. The third year, I probably should have came up, but James Worthy might not have gone to the Lakers. So I could have changed the game dramatically across the board if I came out of school. But, and I couldn't depend on the coin flip. And knowing the NBA like I do now, whatever is probably the best thing I did was stay because then I came out in the right spot at the right time. But I didn't mind. I would have loved to come there and play with the Pacers and the team they had at that point in time. And the Rockets were still on the upswing. They had, Elvin Hayes, Caldwell Jones, a lot of older players that was getting ready to retire. So I knew going there with me and Rodney McCray, my senior year, that we were going to make a change. But coming out early, I don't think that those teams would have been there. But, I think we did with a great team in the NBA. I got to Indianapolis, and, so the rest is history. But the city is great. Now I know kind of all that's there. I didn't know all that beforehand, before the conflict coming out of college. But as I look back, it had been one of those cities that I probably would have been really good at and living and enjoying life there and playing at a high level. So it is a great spot for me.
The Hall of Famer and MVP of the last All-Star Game here in Indiana in 1985, Ralph Sampson, is our guest. Ralph, you are viewed by many, myself included, as one of the greatest bigs of all time in today's NBA, that position has changed so much where outside shooting becomes a part of it and point line is involved in it. And previous players in the past will say, and I view this too, you put any player from any generation that was great, you plop them in any era, they're still going to be great. For you, if you were coming up in the mid-2000s, let's say, where all of a sudden they're asking bigs to be stretch fives and space the floor, would you have adapted your game, do you think, to include perimeter action, or would you have made the game adapt to you being as dominant as you were in the low post?
No, the game. I mean, they would. I mean, think about it. I mean, Bill Fitch was our coach. They would not let us shoot any threes. I don't know how many threes I shot in my career, but they would not let us shoot threes at all. If you shot one, like you're a post-up player, you need to get underneath the basket because you're 7'4", and you should be close to the basket to get all the rebounds. That didn't make sense at that point in time, right? But that's the way the game was. And back then, to me, with the art of the game, today's game doesn't have much art in it. You just shoot a three, and you work on percentages. And, I mean, you got guys shooting threes, as you know, from half court. I mean, I don't know how great that is for basketball, but it is what it is, right? It's entertainment. And so, for me, I think I could have played today, for sure. I would love to play today. With the skills level that I had, I think a lot of players could have played today. I mean, I'm looking at a couple of Jokic out of Denver. I think Bill Laimbeer would have been great today, but he'd been slow with foot like he was. He couldn't jump high, but he never was in the post-up. He shot jump shots, three-pointers all the time, right? And that's the way they played. So certain guys, I think, would have expanded it nicely in today's game. But I do think that, the big guys coming back a little bit every year to get big, and the game is changing. So even I take the big guy at Purdue, right? He's 7 foot tall. He maybe played a year again this year. But he's like a better Mark Eaton to me, right? He's big like Mark Eaton. He plays similar to Mark Eaton. And so there's similarities between him and there's similarities between me and Wemby. I'm looking forward to meeting him one day and kind of see what he is and watch him play, watch him on TV. But, we played, we ran, we jumped, and I was able to do that in high school. And thank God my high school coach, Roger Bragg, is still with us, and Coach Terry Howland that just passed the last year. They let me, be me, and, they try to control it a little bit so I could perfect it, but they made me practice every day if I wanted to dribble the ball to the court, and my high school coach started that.
Ralph Sampson, there's so many connections actually for you that you may not even be aware in terms of just basketball in the state of Indiana. For example, I want to touch on what you just mentioned in Zach Edey. Zach Edey at Purdue has the opportunity, and I think at this point probably we can say will become the first two-time winner of the Wooden Award, joining only Ralph Sampson in that category. The first since you did it and the only to do it since you. What is your thought on having somebody match that record and that feat?
I mean, sometimes you think about it, and in today's game, especially in college, you would not think that ever would be done with NIL and transfer portal and all the stuff going on. But I mean, I love the way Purdue and the coach have put him together and around, and he's a big presence, and he's in the low post again, right? So seeing a low post player do that is great because you're not normally going to see a low post player win National Player of the Year, right? Especially twice. And so I appreciate him, and I appreciate what they do to bring that big man to life. But you've got to figure out also how to play at the next level in the low post or transition again. And here lies the problem with that for me as well. Analytics has changed the game, which we all know. Most of the analytics that are produced at any NBA team are done by Harvard graduates or people like that said you should post up here, or you should shoot from here, or you should play deep from there. But they don't tell you the guy's 7'4" and he's going to block a shot. They don't tell you all that, right? They know that makes to me. So you look at all that and you say, what's the game going to be like when Edey and any other big guy gets to the league? They're going to be game changers because you're going to have to defend him in the post at some point. I don't care who you are. And the players that are on the teams are not going to be able to defend that, all right? So it'll go back to that when you start getting and develop more players that are low post players, because that's going to win you games. And when you need a basket or two, it's not going to be the three-point shot. It's going to be the low post big man, turn around doing a jump hook or sky hook or whatever may be close to the basket that's going to get you up 2 when you need 2 points. And some coaches, just like the Denver coach, somebody's going to figure that out. and it's going to change the game up a little bit, like it always has, and it won't go back to the way it was, but it'll have some flavor.
I think one of the things, Ralph Sampson, our guest, Ralph, you were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You were ubiquitous on that cover from the late 70s and early 80s. I think you were on the cover 6 times in the span of like 18 months. You know, you went to a Final Four with Virginia in 81 where Indiana was, and Philly. And during that time, one of the things that was so unusual and that made you so unique was your fluidity, your ability to run the floor, your ability to do things aside from just being a low block guy. When you look at Wembanyama, who kind of has that similar feel coming in, are there areas to his game that you would talk to him about in terms of preservation of body, ligaments, knees, avoiding some of the injuries that might have hurt you later in your career based on the fluidity and the range that you had at your size?
Yeah, so when I get a chance to talk to him, I'm definitely going to talk about that because he's very fluid. When I see videos of him working out, he does a lot of yoga moves and a lot of stretching, which is going to be crucial. You know, I was the first guy in NBA that brought weights in a locker room, and a guy named Robert Ward, God bless him, he's a good friend of mine. So I go to Houston because I was a big weightlifter in college because, you know, you're too thin, you need to gain weight, you need to put on muscle. That was the thought, right? So between my first and second year, I put on about 15, 16 pounds of solid muscle, and then we go to the Final Four my second year. But into the NBA, they didn't have that. They didn't have nutrition. They don't have the stuff they had today, right? So preservation of body is going to be good for him because they have all the technology. So think about San Antonio has, what, a $500 million practice facility and all the bells and whistles around it. So he's going to get the best treatment. They got the best food. They fly on private planes. So it's a totally different era as far as injury is concerned. But preservation of his body from that height is going to be crucial because you look at Embiid, right? That just hurt his knee. And he's a big boy, right? And he's been playing hard. He could be MVP of the league this year, but he tore his meniscus. And that understands the severity of the meniscus. I tore my meniscus, and that's what happened to me. If you tear it, you try to scrape it, take it out, that's a part of the body that's like a brake pad on your knees. And he's going to keep chopping at him. Then his other knee is going to fail. I know they got better training staff these days, but it's just real. So Wemby, for me, is need to protect his body. It's the right thing that he's with Greg Popovich and that crew. So NBA is smart, right? Let's get it really straight. They're smart in how they position this stuff. And Popovich, new contract, 5 more years, the highest paid coach in the league. It's going to take very good care, and they'll take good care of him well. He just got to be very cognizant of not wanting to play every night if he's tired or hurt himself. And that's what they did with Embiid, right? In the first couple of years, they didn't play him a whole lot because he wasn't ready. And Wemby will do the same thing. He's going to want to play. He's the highlight of the league right now, of the world, and he's going to want to play, but his body and mentally is not quite ready to NBA grind of 82 games. And then you got All-Star break, and you got to go there. And you're going to lose a lot of games before you win a lot of games. He'll learn a lot through that, but taking care of his body is going to be very crucial. I would tell everybody out there, I don't know what LeBron James is doing totally. I know some of the things. But if you can follow what he does, but he's got a freakish body, you should emulate that as much as you can because he's one of the best people with 20 years, 21 years in the league that's taking care of his body. It makes sense. And then the last thing I would say is you look at a big man like you look at Kareem, look at Robert Parrish, myself, all the big guys that I know, the tie to that and their health, strength is yoga. Kareem taught me that early on in my career. I should have done it more, but he was doing it daily. I didn't have that in Houston. I just go to California and do it out there with him a couple of times. But the stretching is very crucial in those ligaments because he's so tall, and then he's got to guard guards, and that's where I think some of the things you have to understand. Don't worry about those guards. Guard them out in the perimeter. They shoot a three. They shoot a three. Set back off of them, try to block the shot, and then when they go to basket, you block the shot because you can't twist and turn like the little guard can because your ligaments and tendons are so long that it puts a lot of stress on your legs. So a lot of things you could teach from that. They got David Robinson and Tim Duncan down. I'm sure they tell him to help him a lot, but hopefully they can teach him some things as well, which I'm sure they will. But you just got to protect his body at all costs.
Ralph, lastly, that 1985 All-Star game, Ralph Sampson is our guest. That's the All-Star game. You were the MVP. I know you were on the West and not the East, but the long-standing, almost 40-year story of that game was that was the game where allegedly Michael Jordan was frozen out by Isaiah Thomas and the members of the East that didn't want the young buck.
Right.
Did you witness any of that?
I didn't really pay attention to it. Again, we were obviously a team. I've heard it after the game, and I haven't even gone back and looked at all that. But you heard the whip between Isaiah and Michael. It's been historical over the years. To me, this is a competitive spirit no matter what. And it stays till this day, I'm sure, to some extent. But, you squash all that because I like the competitive nature of everybody, right? And we all have one. And you want to win. And then Detroit and Chicago, they would battle each other all day long. So it stayed in the All-Star game probably. It stayed in the locker room. Who knows how long it went under the scenes. But I never saw it live. And I didn't really pay attention to it because I was more worried about our team and what we were doing and beating the Lakers and everything else before I would worry about somebody else's team.
Now, lastly, Ralph, if you come for the All-Star game this weekend and Jerry Seasting's here, do you have to buy him dinner or how does that work out?
Yeah, no doubt. Between Danny Ainge and him, I may have to buy him dinner. But I think it's probably dinner because they started it. I was rolling in that game because I had said, okay, great. If y'all going to win, you can't win on our home court. I mean, they won the series, okay, great, but you're not going to win in Houston. And so I was prepared to play and ready to play. And if you watch that video, they were coming off picks. I was hitting picks down when they come off, and they would hit me in crazy spots, as you know. And so I got frustrated after about the third time. And things just escalated, and we had to go to blows. I got kicked out. We won. But remember, Kim got kicked out in that game that I got the shot with the Lakers, and we had an argument there, which Maurice Lucas and the crew. So we were a feisty bunch. We were ready to play. we hung together, and we didn't take anything lightly. So we were good.
Basketball in the '80s, man, I love it. And Jerry Seasting will meet you at Elmo and buy you your shrimp cocktail. Ralph, how's that to make up for it?
I'm allergic to Jerry Seasting. I'm allergic to shrimp, so I'll take a steak. I'll take a steak.
All right, Ralph. Listen, I appreciate it, man. It's a thrill to talk to you, and you are certainly a part of Indiana basketball lore with the Most Valuable Player Award back in '85, the coin flip and all of it. But one of the great names in basketball, and certainly appreciate the time today. Enjoy the All-Star Game weekend.
Thank you, guys, for having me, and we'll have it again when it's over. Anytime, let me know, but you guys enjoy as well. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ralph Sampson, the 1985 NBA Most Valuable Player. Coming up top of the hour, Adrian Wojnarowski joins us. By the way, if you're unfamiliar with it, in the '86 NBA Finals, Jerry Seasting was with the Celtics, and as you heard Ralph Sampson mention there, they got into a little skirmish, shall we say. Ralph landed a punch and a one-game suspension.
Hey, JMV, thinning hair this year, grow your